Your dish listens, not to radio waves, to you. You bought Starlink because you wanted fast internet without the cable monopoly. You wanted to stop giving money to Comcast or Spectrum or whatever local provider raised your bill again. You wanted freedom from the wires, but freedom was never the product. You were. Starlink launched in 2020 with a promise: high-speed satellite internet for rural areas, for travelers, for anyone the ground-based providers ignored. The dish was sleek. The app was simple. The idea was intoxicating. A constellation of thousands of satellites beaming data directly to a pizza box on your roof. No wires, no waiting, no corporate gatekeepers. Elon Musk said it would fund Mars colonization. He said it would connect the unconnected. He said privacy was a priority. In March of 2023, SpaceX updated the Starlink privacy policy. Most people didn't read it. You probably didn't either. Buried in Section 4.2 under the heading Service Data was a sentence that changed everything. We may collect, use, share, and otherwise process information about your device, your network, your location, and your online activities to provide, maintain, and improve the service. Every internet provider writes something like that. But Starlink added a clause. Most others don't. This data may be retained indefinitely and shared with third parties, including government entities, without additional notice to you. Not may be shared if required by law. Not in response to a valid warrant. May be shared without additional notice. That was 2023. By 2024, the first report surfaced. A researcher in Germany bought a Starlink dish and ran a simple test. He asked, "What data leaves this dish that I didn't authorize?" He found that the dish pings a SpaceX server every 30 seconds with location coordinates, device identifiers, and network routing information. Even when the user's own traffic was encrypted, the dish was still reporting back. SpaceX said this was normal. Every satellite provider does it. But Starlink added one more thing. The dish's firmware can be updated remotely without user permission to collect new data fields. You don't get a notification. You don't get an opt-out. You wake up one day and your dish is collecting something it wasn't the day before. Let me give you a name. Thomas. Thomas lives in northern Idaho. He bought Starlink in 2022 because his only other option was DSL from a provider that charged $80 for 3 megabits per second. He's a retired network engineer. He knows how data moves. In January of 2025, he noticed his dish's outbound traffic had increased by 17%, despite no change in his own usage. He packet sniffed his own connection. He found that his dish was sending his approximate GPS coordinates every 60 seconds to a SpaceX server in Hawthorne, California. He had location services turned off on every device in his house. He had never authorized location sharing. The dish didn't care. He contacted Starlink support. They told him location data was required for network optimization and regulatory compliance. He asked which regulation. They didn't answer. He asked how to disable it. They said it couldn't be disabled. He asked if SpaceX sold this data. They said no. He asked if SpaceX shared it with the government. They said only as required by law, which is not the same as no. Thomas still uses Starlink. He has no other choice. This isn't one person. This is the architecture. The Federal Communications Commission granted SpaceX permission to launch nearly 12,000 satellites. That number has since grown. Every one of those satellites passes over your house multiple times a day. The dish on your roof is not just a receiver, it is a transmitter. It sends your approximate location, your network's unique identifiers, and metadata about your traffic patterns to a company whose CEO has openly discussed creating a global internet that cannot be shut down, without ever explaining who controls the off switch. In June of 2024, a Freedom of Information request filed by a privacy advocacy group revealed that the Department of Defense had entered into a contract with SpaceX for enhanced Starlink capabilities. The terms were redacted. The value was $90 million. The existence of the contract was not denied. When asked for comment, a SpaceX spokesperson said Starlink is proud to support the United States government and that all data sharing complies with applicable laws. That word again, applicable. Here's what applicable laws actually say. The Electronic Communications Privacy Act of 1986, yes, 1986, requires a warrant for the government to access the content of your communications. But metadata is different. Your location, your connection times, your data volume, the IP addresses you connect to. That can be obtained with a subpoena, which does not require a judge's finding of probable cause. It requires a lawyer's signature. Starlink knows this. Their privacy policy says they will object to overly broad or legally deficient government requests, but there is no public record of them ever doing so. Meanwhile, the dish keeps pinging. In February of 2025, a journalist at a major tech publication tried to delete her Starlink account. She followed the steps in the app. She received a confirmation email. 30 days later, she received a bill. She called the support. They said the deletion request had been canceled due to account activity. She hadn't used the account. She asked what activity. They said they couldn't disclose. She asked to speak to a manager. They said no. She eventually had to cancel her credit card to stop the charges. Her data, she was told, would be retained for up to 10 years for legal and regulatory purposes. 10 years. That is longer than many marriages, longer than most cars last, longer than the time between when the first iPhone was released and when the last BlackBerry was discontinued. And you cannot opt out. Let me show you what Starlink collects according to its own policy. Device information, network information, location information, usage information, communications content if you use their services, billing information, customer support interactions, survey responses. And this line, we may also collect information about you from other sources, including public databases, marketing partners, and social media platforms. From other sources, public databases, marketing partners, not from you, about you. You have never consented to this. Your consent was assumed the moment you plugged in the dish. Now, zoom out. Where else is this happening? Every satellite internet provider collects data. Every ISP collects data. But Starlink is different in 3 ways. 1, they control both the ground equipment and the space infrastructure. 2, they are not bound by state-level privacy laws in the same way because their terms of service designate Delaware as the governing jurisdiction, but their satellites operate in international space. 3, their stated goal is to put 42,000 satellites in orbit. 42,000 data collection nodes, each one capable of software updates you cannot see or stop. The European Union's General Data Protection Regulation requires explicit consent for data collection. Starlink operates in the EU. Their privacy policy for EU users includes additional clauses about data processing agreements and the right to request deletion. But enforcement of those rights against a company with no physical headquarters in Europe has proven difficult. Belgian and German privacy watchdogs have opened inquiries. Neither has issued a fine. In the United States, there is no federal privacy law. There are state laws in California, Virginia, Colorado, Connecticut, Utah, and a handful of others. Starlink claims to comply with the California Consumer Privacy Act. But the CCPA allows you to request that a business delete your personal information. Starlink's policy says they will honor such requests unless an exception applies. The exceptions include fraud prevention, legal compliance, internal research, and otherwise permitted by law. That last exception is a truck you could drive a satellite through. You are not paranoid. You are paying attention. 3 questions to ask yourself tonight. First, what data is your Starlink dish sending right now that you didn't authorize? The answer is in the packet logs. Most people don't know how to read them. That is not your failure. That is the design. Second, who has access to that data besides you? The answer is SpaceX, the Department of Defense under contract. Any third party Starlink calls a service provider, any government entity that sends a subpoena, and any future buyer if SpaceX ever sells or spins off Starlink, which their SEC filings list as a possibility. Third, what would you do differently if you knew the dish on your roof was not yours? Because legally, it might not be. The terms of service state that SpaceX retains ownership of the hardware. You are leasing a data collection device. You paid $500 for the privilege of leasing it. You pay $120 a month for the privilege of using it. And every 60 seconds, it reports back to a company whose ultimate goal has never been your privacy. The door is open, not to despair, to decision. You don't have to smash the dish. You don't have to go back to DSL. You just have to see it for what it is. A tool, a useful tool, a fast tool, a tool that connects you to the world while quietly disconnecting you from the fiction that technology serves you first. Starlink is not evil. It is not good. It is a machine with incentives. Those incentives are not aligned with your privacy. They never were. The question is not whether Elon Musk cares about you. The question is whether you care enough to ask the questions he hopes you never think to ask. Your dish listens. Now you know what it's hearing. Until next time.